The night Luke Carter ruined his life didn't start with violence or blood. It started with laughter and whiskey inside the Iron Spur Saloon, a place where bad luck waited patiently for proud men to stumble. And Luke stumbled hard, pushing through the swinging doors with a bottle already halfway to empty and a heart heavier than his saddle, the noise crashing over him like a wave as smoke curled beneath the lamps and cards slapped tables like gunshots. Luke was 28 and known across the territory as the man who could break any horse alive. Tall, broad-shouldered son, burned and quiet, but loneliness had a way of grinding a man down slower than any trail. He drank to forget the silence of his cabin and the ghosts that rode with him. He didn't notice the way eyes tracked him or the way smiles sharpened when Jake Monroe called his name from the poker table. Luke dropped his last hard-earned bills on the felt, telling himself luck had to turn eventually. At first it did. Coins stacked up and laughter burned in his chest, but greed crept in and whiskey blurred his judgment. The cards turned cold and everything slid away from him. Wages, saddle rifle, pride, until only his horse remained. That was when Silas Crow leaned forward, smiling like a man who enjoyed suffering. "One more hand," he said, "I'll stake you." Luke knew better. Every instinct screamed, but pride spoke louder and he agreed. The condition was simple and cruel. "Do what I say if you lose." Laughter rolled through the room when Luke accepted. The cards fell, and fate didn't blink. Luke lost, the room erupted, and Silas delivered his prize with a grin. "You're getting married, not to some town girl, but to the widow out by Red Creek," the woman everyone whispered. About a black woman named Amara Reed who lived alone since her husband died in a mine collapse. Luke felt sick as the men laughed harder. The banker added poison to the wound, threatening her land if she refused. Luke staggered into the cold, knowing he'd ruined 2 lives with 1 night of weakness. 3 days later, the church was packed with people eager to watch humiliation dressed as a wedding. Luke stood sober, shaking, wearing his only clean shirt when the doors opened and Amara stepped inside, and everything stopped. She wore a simple dress and carried herself like someone who refused to bow, even when the world demanded it. Her eyes were steady but wounded, and Luke felt smaller than he ever had. The vows were rushed, and cruel laughter echoed. Until the words were spoken and they were bound. Outside, beneath the sun, Luke whispered, "They think they won, but the game isn't over." She looked at him, then truly looked, and something unreadable flickered behind her calm. They rode away together, strangers tied by a bet neither deserved. The cabin waited small and lonely. Luke offered her the bed and took the floor, refusing to claim anything from her. That night, as wind scraped the walls, she made one thing clear: "This marriage may be forced, but I will not be owned." Luke promised dignity and meant it with everything he had. Morning came with the smell of coffee she'd made without a word. She worked with quiet strength and rode into town beside him, unflinching beneath cruel stares. Kindness came from unexpected places and cruelty from familiar ones. Luke watched her stand tall, and something inside him shifted. He didn't know when respect turned into something heavier, but he knew one truth before the sunset. That night he would protect her even if it cost him everything. Trouble didn't wait long to test them. It arrived before dawn on pounding hooves and drunken laughter as riders circled the cabin, calling Luke's name and mocking the woman inside. Luke raised his rifle ready to die for his ground when the first shotgun blast thundered beside him, and Amara stood in the doorway, smoke curling from the barrel warning the next shot wouldn't miss. The men cursed and scattered as a sudden dust storm rose like judgment, swallowing the land and forcing them to flee. Inside the shaking cabin, Luke shielded her with his body, and for the first time she leaned into him, not from fear but trust. After the storm, they worked side by side, repairing damage, and something fragile took root. Days turned into weeks and partnership replaced tension. Amara worked harder than any hand Luke ever hired, milking, tending, mending, learning the land as if it spoke to her. Luke admired her strength and quiet intelligence more each day. But danger grew beyond their fences. A cattle baron named Harlan Voss set his sights on Luke's land, and Amara herself, angered by rejection and embarrassed by resistance. Shops closed their doors to Luke under pressure, and supplies vanished as winter crept closer. Still, Amara refused to break, stretching food, hunting small game, and standing firm. Fences were cut, threats whispered, and insults hurled, until Luke warned men to never speak of his wife again. When food finally ran thin, Luke chose the mountains, deciding to cross dangerous passes alone for supplies. Amara pressed a piece of her quilt into his hand and told him to come back. The mountains tried to kill him, with snow wolves and hunger taking his horse and nearly his life, but he pressed on, driven by one thought: getting home to her. Back at the cabin, Amara faced her own trial when Voss's men arrived, threatening fire and disappearance. She stood armed and unshaken, warning that every threat was recorded, and courage stalled them where fear should have lived. 4 days later, Luke returned, frostbitten, barely standing, leading a mule loaded with supplies, and she ran to him without thinking, pulling him inside as tears broke through her calm. They spoke by firelight of fear and survival, and something shifted into truth when Luke admitted she was the reason he survived the storm, and she admitted the marriage had become something real to her too. The moment shattered when a gunshot exploded through the window, sending them diving for cover as the war they'd tried to avoid finally arrived. Gunfire tore through the cabin as Voss's men attacked under cover of darkness. Believing fear would finish what cruelty started, Luke fired back with deadly precision, while Amara reloaded beside him, calm, steady, unbreakable. Flames licked the barn as riders tried to scatter livestock, but neighbors arrived, drawn by shots and smoke, unwilling to watch injustice burn unchecked. The fight ended with men fleeing and Voss exposed when a federal marshal rode in carrying evidence Amara had gathered, proving threats, coercion, and land fraud. The valley shifted that night as truth broke louder than gunfire, and Voss was taken away stripped of power. Winter passed hard but honest, and when spring came, the land bloomed like a promise kept. Luke rebuilt stronger than before, and Amara's quilts hung bright inside the cabin, now truly a home. The town changed slowly, but it changed as respect replaced whispers, and kindness followed courage. One evening, beneath an open sky, Luke stood beside Amara, no longer bound by a bet but by choice. He told her he loved her not because fate forced them together, but because she made him a better man. Amara took his hand and answered that she chose him not out of survival, but faith. Their marriage, born from cruelty, became something rare, built on dignity, loyalty, and fire. And in a land that tried to break them, they stood unbroken proof that even the worst bets can be redeemed when two strong souls refuse to surrender.